So thank you for joining us tonight. This is the third in a series of 9 making the best place for all community summits that started last month in June. It's going to be taking place over the next several months. My name is James Kitchen. I direct the Office of Community Engagement and Constituent Services for County Executive Pittman, and I'm going to be moderating the discussion this evening. With us up here on the table is Sergio Polanco. He is our Multicultural Engagement Officer for the County Executive's Office, and he's going to be helping take notes tonight to make sure that we follow up with everyone on things. I want to take a moment and introduce a handful of county staff that are here. We have the Director of Planning and Zoning, Steve Kai Ziegler, is up here. We have the Director of the Department of Public Works, Chris Phipps, is in the room somewhere. There he is. There he is, right here. We have Dr. Kay Bodges de Bruin, the Chief of Staff is here in the back. Matt Power is here, the Chief Administrative Officer for the county. And we've got various other county staff with us here as well. A couple elected officials that are here. We have Bryant Kemet is here from Councilman Pruski's office. I see Jessica Cook from Senator Cardin's office in the back here. And then I want to introduce, and most of you know her, but Council Chairwoman Rodvian is here with us as well. And do you want to have a minute to, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'm Lisa Rodvian, and I really just wanted to say hello and introduce myself because a lot of you I probably already represent because I represent District 6, which includes Annapolis and Crownsville, but the boundaries of District 6 have changed, so they now include Harold Harbor, a good part of Millersville, Indian Landing, and Arundel on the Severn. So I look forward to meeting all of you, my new District 6 residents, and welcome to the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. All right, so tonight we will mainly be discussing the issues of education, the environment and health, and public safety. After an opening statement by County Executive Pittman, we will spend about 20 minutes discussing each of those topics. County Executive Pittman will then make closing remarks, and we'll stay around for half an hour or so afterwards to have one-on-one conversations with those of you that want to. And I misspoke there. After we do those 3 segments, we will have a time where you can ask questions or make comments on any topic that doesn't fall into one of those 3 buckets. After he makes his opening remarks, we're going to start the community discussion portion of the night. We're actually going to have a community member come forward and introduce each of those segments, and then those of you that have comments or questions to make on each topic will be invited to make a statement. Each person I call on will have 1 minute to make their comment or ask a question. The county executive will respond as is appropriate. And I do ask that you keep your remarks on topic for the segment that we're handling then, and as close to a minute as you can. If you go much over a minute, I will ask you to summarize, as there are a lot of people here hoping to be able to make comments or ask questions. Not everyone that signed up to speak is probably going to get a chance to ask their question tonight. There are just a lot of us here, and there's probably not going to be time to do that. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, and if you send them one ahead of time, we will follow up with you in writing. If you get inspired to make a comment or ask a question, you can send it to community-summits@aacounty.org, and we will follow up with you. The email address is also on that agenda that was on your seat as you walked in. Also on that agenda is a QR code. When this is over, if you could scan that with your phone and just fill out a quick survey and tell us what you thought about this event. Again, we're doing 6 more of these, so we'd love to hear your feedback on what went well, what didn't go well, so we can adjust based on that as we move forward. Without any further ado, I'm now going to bring up County Executive Pittman.
So I may cover a few things before we get into the question and answer that I know are on everybody's mind early on, so that that may shorten the number of questions. We'll see. Or it may change the nature of the questions based on what I say. But I think the first time I was in this building was when it was before I was the county executive. I was standing right over against that wall. It was standing room only. It was packed in here. Most of you were probably here. It was when they were presenting the proposal to build the stadium at Crownsville Hospital Center, the Bayhawk Stadium with the hotel and the commercial district and the interchange off of 97. And this community stood up and made their voices heard. And I remember in a sort of an arrogant way asking a question of I guess it was the engineer for the developer, maybe it was the actual developer of the project that was here, and said, so I'm going to be the county executive by the time you actually get the ball rolling on this, and what are you expecting the county to do in terms of financing for this project? And they didn't have a very clear answer. But after I came into office, and I had made clear that I opposed the project completely, that it was inappropriate in an RA-zoned part of the county to put that kind of commercial development in with no infrastructure and change the nature of the community. But they still tried. After I got in, they sent me their plan, and it actually depended on the county using its bonding authority to build the whole thing and then lease it to them to run and make money. And we would not have had any bonding authority to build schools or fire stations or any of the other things that we normally use our bonds for. So I don't know why or how it got to that point, but that was sort of a no-brainer to say no to. I do want to say something about Crownsville Hospital Center right up front, though, because I am very proud of where we are right now, and I think we're in a great place. I met with the governor about 3 weeks after being in office. He invited me in, as he does all the new county executives, and he said, what can we do together? And I said, Crownsville. I said, you wanted to transfer the property to the county, and the county executive didn't want to. A previous governor and county executive had the opposite. The county executive wanted it. The governor didn't want to transfer it. We can actually come together on this because we both agree it should be transferred to the county. And he said, great, let's do it fast. And then it took a long time. COVID came along, and they had to finish yet another study to determine that the state wanted to surplus the property. They'd already determined it, but they had to determine it again, it seemed to me. And it took almost 3 years before we finally got notification that they were ready to take that step. So we had to then go to the Board of Public Works and convince them, the three of them, first to surplus it, and then a few weeks later, just about 2 weeks ago, to take a vote to transfer it to Arundel County. And we were being very careful during all of this process. We had our CAO, Matt Power, who happened to have worked on Crownsville in the past when he was in the O'Malley administration working on it. We had Chris Trumbauer, who led the study that was done, the group that was working on it before on behalf of his district, District 6, on the county council, where he was for 8 years. Janice Hayes-Williams, who's standing in the back, was his staff person who did all the real work, right, Janice? And and so we have a dream team of people, I think, who know Crownsville, who were working with the state agencies to line everything up. So the historic people to figure out which buildings were going to be preserved, and all of the obstacles to getting government to actually work with itself, the state and the county, to be able to transfer the land. We don't have the keys yet, but we got the 3-0 vote, and the keys will be coming. Right now, Central Services is working with the state to transfer all of the security and the maintenance, and the good news is that in addition to getting the deed to the property, that being able to with a proviso that it cannot be developed, that it only can be used for public purposes, and if there were any land that were going to be transferred to another owner, that the Board of Public Works would step in again. So it truly is protected land at this point. Yeah, I mean, it's the process begins now. It begins very soon. We did not want to have a lot of conversations about details about what was going to be done there that might raise questions that would get the state to ask questions and say no. So they have said yes. So I think all of you know that the first real step in all of that is creating Crownsville Hospital Memorial Park. And that was the vision all along, that this is 540 acres in the geographic center of our county, and it's beautiful, beautiful land. There are 69 buildings that are in various stages of disrepair, some of which will come down and some of which will remain because they're designated historic. The central campus, those buildings have to remain. And so there will be a lot of work and a lot of expense involved in that. The vision is healing. The vision is the same vision that Crownsville was supposed to be, healing, and particularly mental health. You know, I believe that this country has failed to address, in this community, everywhere, we have really failed to deal with the challenges of mental health in all of our society. And Crownsville was an effort to do that. We can do much better than Crownsville did. We have to tell the story of the history of what went on there, and we have to make it a place where people can heal. And there's no better place to heal than nature, and so we have to preserve the nature that is there. So I just want to tell you briefly that we are at the very early stages of the community engagement of this, and I will just go through a few committees that are going to be put together, sectors of all of this work. You can imagine it's going to be a huge project that'll take many years, but we'll have a steering committee of staff, department heads that are going to be involved, as well as some of our senior staff. But there will be committees that one will be the Rec and Parks Committee, because first is the park. And in this community, it's the Rec and Parks projects have been, you know, you've been through the work with Millersville Park, and we'll talk about that momentarily. There's been the talk of something at Valentine Creek. We'll talk about that as well. But I can guarantee you that there will be a level of community engagement in planning this park that has never been seen in this county before. So there will be a lot of work up front by all of you. There will be a facilities and utilities group that will be working on what happens with each building, what happens with the roads, what happens with the infrastructure there to improve it. There will be a behavioral health group that will look at the big picture of what kinds of services and what kinds of organizations that we would want to have operating there. There will be a cultural history group that will focus on telling the story, whether it's the storyboards, the memorial at the burial grounds, or a future museum that would tell the story of what happened at Crownsville. And then there will be a community advisory group that will be made up of the people, the residents of the community surrounding Crownsville that are on all of those other committees that will be engaged as we go. So a ton of work to do, but this is, of all of the things that I do in my job, as county executive, I hope that I will walk away from this job. Hopefully it'll be in 4 years rather than in a few months. But in 4 years, the project will be a lot further along. But that this will be something that I look back on as having really brought this county together, this whole county, and healed it, and preserved the nature and preserved the character of this part of the county, which is beautiful. Most of you know that I come from South County, and I love trees, I love nature, and big part of the reason that I ran for this office is that I didn't feel like the planning, the management of the growth in the county was being done appropriately. There were plans that were not followed. We now have a plan. It's called Plan 2040, and I am very proud of it. And I think the more you look at it, the more you'll see there's great stuff in there. There will be region plans that will be done. This region is in the third set for region planning. It's where you engage with the stakeholders advisory group, and there will be no comprehensive rezoning until there's a region plan. And that, to me, is how you empower communities, is you do not let the county council do comprehensive rezoning before you all have your say. And small area planning, that's not how it works. So small area plans back in the early 2000s did not have that empowering aspect to them. So I encourage you all to get involved in that process when it happens. We are here as Region 6, as one of those 9 regions, and that's how we're doing these community summits, because I feel so strongly that we should be planning in everything that we do. But we have to talk about the today stuff as well as the long-term stuff, and I think we're here today to talk about the today stuff more. Very quickly, I want to just say for Valentine Creek, which I know will come up as well, I was out there yesterday with a group of you and walked the trails and saw what was there. I already knew coming in, having talked to Jessica Lays, the Director of Rec and Parks, that the concept design that was presented to a stakeholder group was a concept. There were three designs that none of them were consistent with our values in our administration, and they knew that. We're talking about a piece of land that is trees that have been there for a very long time, steep slopes, and water that is not the kind of water where you would want a boat ramp because it's about 1 foot deep. And there's just the bang for the buck for water access there would be, it wouldn't be there. The cost, we don't need to do further study to figure out how much it would cost to put a road and a parking lot and a boat ramp at that site. There are other opportunities for water access. It's beautiful property that you all use, and we want people to continue to use to enjoy the nature and enjoy the trails. And that includes water access because you can go right down to it. The land was bought with the idea of water access by the previous administration. I think most of you know it was there were some lots there that were subdivided, and a developer came in and bought that land for only about $400,000 and then turned around and sold it to the county for about $1.3 million. So the developer did great. The county ended up with the land with the idea of water access, but we will preserve that land. So you can... And as you know, it's connected to other preserved land. And we have now the Green Infrastructure Master Plan in this county that the goal is to preserve 30% for perpetuity, protect for perpetuity, 30% of the land mass of our county by the year 2030. And it's an aggressive goal, but I think by doing projects like this and engaging landowners all across this county who have land that could be preserved and convincing them that it's in their interest to protect it long term, that we can get there with our Green Infrastructure Master Plan. And then finally, I just want to mention with Millersville Park, it's been through a lot of iterations since it was purchased by the county of what might go there. The last one was the tennis facility, and the county council voted that down, and so it's back to active recreation, which is the program open space requirement when the county purchased that land, was that it be used for active recreation. So we're back to the concept of ball fields / community parks / whatever we come up with. And so what happened on that, and I met with a group of community leaders about this not too long ago, during the budget process, and heard a lot of concern about the scope of the project, the scope of what gets put there, how many ball fields, how many people are going to be using it, and how much traffic is going to be created from it. And so what we did was we paused the funding, we put it off, the funding for the project, so that the traffic study could be done, the environmental studies could be done, looking at the aquifer to see whether or not there's enough water there for whatever water requirements would be there. And then we come back and do the community engagement, and then based on what we hear and based on what we find in those studies, put together the plan for the active recreation use of that property. My hope is that we can come up with something that does meet some of the needs for active recreation for sports, but also is an amenity for the community that's near there, and that has trails and pavilions and the kinds of things that people can enjoy. There's other work that we're doing in the area that is going to produce ball fields. So I believe that some of the pressure will be taken off. Crownsville Hospital Center Master Plan might include some sports, some ball fields. We may be able to work something at some point at the Navy Dairy Farm where there can be some active recreation there. And so it's all got to be looked at in terms of the big picture. But it also has to be consistent with Anne Arundel County's Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan that is just been approved again, and it does call for sports fields. I think we all know, those of us who have kids in sports, those of us who play sports, we need more places to do that. So I have talked for too long. I know this is a little different from the way that we wanted to do it, but those might not fall into the buckets, and I wanted to make sure that I at least address those three or four issues. And finally, I just want to apologize to my staff that we do all these town halls. I think most of you know that I think we've done 29 budget town halls in 4 years. We do them in every district, and then we did one in Spanish as well this last year before we do our budget, so that people have a real opportunity to engage in that. And we've done God knows how much community engagement with plan and zoning on the Plan 2040, and now we're doing we did our green infrastructure master plan. I mean, we're always doing planning, and we're always having meetings about that, and then we have community town halls whenever something hot comes up. It's just, I was a community organizer for a decade, and I don't feel that government really can get anything hard done unless people are engaged in it. So all of the real successes we've had and the communities that we've protected have been because people stood up and engaged in it. So it's just the way we roll. It means we work a little bit harder. And so now I will turn it back over and do more listening and less talking. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive. So we're going to get right into the education segment of the evening. And so I'd like to invite up Peggy Cruz to introduce the segment.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Pittman, I think that your summits are great. Thank you for having them. It's, as a citizen, it's really awesome to know that I live in a place where the elected officials are interested to hear what I have to say. So, as you know, I'm the chairperson of the Joint Commission on the Opportunity Gap. What we do is we provide assessment and oversight on the factors that contribute to the opportunity gaps that exist in AACPS and in our county. And in my day job, I am a school nurse. I work for School Health Services in Arundel County. I actually used to be a school nurse over at Millersville Elementary School. And what we do is we try to keep our kids healthy, safe, and able to learn. This is in direct keeping with the quote that I think about every day before I go to work by former Surgeon General Dr. Winston Elders, who said that you can't educate a child who isn't healthy, and you can't keep a child healthy who isn't educated. Being a mom of two kids who are currently in school at AACPS, the subject of education is something that's very, very important to me. So every now and then I get to overhear my kids talking about some of the concepts that they learn from school. And I can see that they're very well on their way to becoming citizens who respect laws and who take their civic responsibilities very seriously and who are capable of engaging in some great discourse that's aimed at exchanging ideas for their betterment and for the betterment of those around them. So in my opinion, I think that this is a reflection of the wonderful, wonderful work that goes on in AACPS. Those teachers and the school staff over the years have really just done an awesome job educating my children. I would like to rest assured that the school staff is being compensated commensurate with the huge impact that they've had in my children's lives and the lives of all the students in the county. I know that as the county executive, you don't control policy level decision making in AACPS, but that you do play a really important role in partnering with AACPS and providing funding. So I appreciate that over the past few years, you've, among numerous initiatives, you've restored annual step and cost of living increases that our teachers and school staff depend on.
I was going to say that, but you got it.
It's just really huge. They depend on it. They 100% absolutely deserve it. And something else that I appreciate that you've done is increasing funding for Arundel County Community College. They have received top national ranking among community colleges. I think that's fantastic. That said, there's still a lot of work to do in order to make our schools the best that they can be for our students and for the staff. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what improvements you envision for the future of Arundel County Public Schools and how you plan to partner with AACPS and other stakeholders to bring your vision to fruition.
Yeah, okay. I'm optimistic. And the reason I'm optimistic, it's hard to be optimistic when you, I guess, hear stories from teachers about how difficult it is right now with kids who are addicted to devices, who spent 2 years not coming into school and missed, some of the younger kids in particular, they missed really, really important times. My sister teaches at Annapolis High School, and that period of teaching online and then the transition back into the classroom has been really, really difficult. The part that makes me optimistic, though, is that in our school system and in our state, really, there's some major investment happening. There are new schools being built, which is good, to have facilities where all the kids feel like it's they're valued, they're built to learn. Y'all have the Old Mill Cluster, and there are a bunch of new schools being built. There has to be, as some of these new schools come on, there will be some redistricting that the school board will have to do, and that's always controversial, but that's a school board responsibility, not mine, fortunately. The thing that concerns me the most is that we do have this opportunity gap. We do have schools and kids in schools that are kids who come to school, kids who come to kindergarten not ready. And our kindergarten readiness scores in the whole state, probably the whole country, but in the whole state, we have a program to assess them. And more than half the kids are not assessed as ready. And depending on race and neighborhood, really, and race and income, the kindergarten readiness scores are very different. So we have to reach down to the bottom in particular and get those scores up. And our library system, our health and human service agencies, the work that we do on housing and transportation and transit, all and having a better economy, our economic development work, so that families have livable wages, so that kids don't grow up in trauma, so that by the time they come to school, they've had some opportunity and their lives have been stable, I guess is the best word, so that then they get on track when they come into school. We have a new superintendent coming in, Dr. Bedell. He's got a fantastic reputation. He starts in August, and he was in Kansas City. And when I read what the mayor of Kansas City said about losing him, I felt really good about getting him. So, and I heard him at his press conference when he was here, and the way he answered the questions, I think people are going to feel a sense of progress, that he's really a brilliant leader, which I think our school system needs. Dr. Arlotto, I think, was also a great superintendent, and the board made the decision to move on and move into the future. The state blueprint for education is actually, I think, a really well-researched plan that will help both with the inequities and really just the quality of education in our school system. They looked at the best schools in the world and tried to find the characteristics of those schools. And while there was talk over the last few years about it was a very expensive plan and we couldn't afford it, well, the state had this huge surplus this year. So it looks like funding the blueprint is actually quite doable, and it's the right thing to do. So we put our resources into education in the county. We put a lot of resources in. It was very important to get the teacher compensation up so that the morale was up, and I think that has helped. And yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic. We have to invest, and I think if we implement the blueprint and we do it enthusiastically, and the communities rally around, our schools will improve, and the gaps will narrow. I mean, I also have been optimistic about the economy, that wages have been going up at the bottom end of the scale, which helps families. That's a little more uncertain right now. We don't know, the impacts of inflation and how long that's going to last. But really, a lot of it does depend on the economy and the opportunity for families. And one of the great things about this county is we have fantastic economic drivers, and there are more businesses starting up in our county than there ever have been. And it's really exciting to see. So hang on. It'll be an interesting ride in the coming years. But nothing is more important than investing in the future, which is through our kids and our education, in my view.
All right. Thank you, sir. So now we will have you all, community members, have a chance to come up and again, either make a comment or ask a question. So you can just tell us what to do better in terms of education, what we should be focusing on, how we should be partnering with the schools, or you can ask a question as well. I think I only had one person sign up ahead of time saying they wanted to speak on this topic. Is Libby Soroka here?
That's me.
Yep. If you want to come up, and you can keep it on education, and you have a minute.
Well, I do have a few more questions than just education, but since that's my title.
I appreciate it.
So this year, I will have graduated from Arundel High School 50 years, and I see no vision. We're the same spot we were 50 years ago. Portables, crowded schools. I went to school on split sessions. I don't have any children in school now since, I was not being very home. But
Thank you. Well, and thank you for your service. But in terms of the lack of change, lack of progress, or what appears to be a lack of progress, I think part of what we've seen in this county is that the population has grown a lot, and the investment in the schools didn't keep up with the growth in population. That was true in the police department. It was true in the fire department. It was true in some of our other agencies, and we had to do some catch up. So there is the school construction plan. We are on track. This was the first year that we were able to fully fund the school board's budget request on the capital improvements and fully fund the pay request as well. I mean, it's important that it's not just class size, but it's the quality of the education and the teaching, and it goes on and on and on. I don't have great answers. You could talk to my sister. She's got all kinds of ideas about how to improve the school system. My job is to fund it, and that's what my commitment is.
But that's the start.
Yeah.
You have to have this.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment or ask a question on the topic of education? You can just pop your hand up, come up to the mic. Yes, sir.
Pittman, is enrollment rising or falling, and how do you measure that? Is that like a percentage of kids who live in the county, who go to public school? How's that measured, and which direction is it going?
Well, it was rising quite rapidly, and then COVID, it dropped. There were a number of families who either started homeschooling or went to private schools, and so we expect it to continue to rise. It was just a blip, and class sizes were growing. I mean, we did hire over 500 new teachers over the last 4 years, over 200 new special ed teachers, a lot of other additional staff as well. And some of that was to reduce class size, some of that was just to keep up with increasing enrollment. And then the new construction of new schools is to catch up with what we need in those areas. Now, with Steve Kaiziegler, our planning officer in the front row here, I have to say that it's not that we don't have enough seats in our school overall countywide. It's where they are. There are 10,000 empty seats in our school system if you look at the state capacities. But they're in areas, so for development, they're in areas where we don't want to develop. This is an area where we don't want to develop, but the schools are full. In South County, the schools are not full, and we don't have the infrastructure. So we're going to do smart growth, and we want to do our development where we have the train stations or where we have at least the infrastructure. It doesn't line up with where the schools are. So as these new schools get built, and they're going to be required anyway to do redistricting because the schools are going to be in different places, hopefully they can even some of that out.
All right. Anyone else? Education, question, comment? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm here because a lot of members of First Christian Community Church, where I attend, had a concern on last year during the school year, and that was on transportation and getting our children to school. And so I'd like to really hear what the plans are going into the new school year, whether we've rectified that problem, are there still some challenges that we're going to face. I know a number of members of the church actually volunteered, whether it's a morning shift or afternoon shift, to either get children into the school system or pick them up and get them home. So be interested in hearing what are the plans, what is developed, and what is evolved, and where will we be in this school year. Thank you.
Yeah, if you saw this morning's Capital Gazette, you might have noticed that I spoke up on that very issue again, and once again took a little bit of heat for it. But I'm supposed to leave that to the school board and the school system. But when there aren't buses picking kids up, you get a little frustrated, and at a certain point you say, look, we got to do something. That's what happened during the school year when I sort of went down to a school board meeting, and they wouldn't let me speak either. So, but we did get their attention, and what we ended up doing was using county federal money to do a hiring and retention bonus for bus drivers because the bus driving companies just could not keep up with the fact that Amazon was paying so much more. And, you know, in government, we can't change wages as quickly as they do in the private sector. So they got left behind. And after COVID, they had lost drivers anyway when schools reopened. So shortage of drivers with these private contractors, and there's still a shortage of drivers. And so we have continued to do that supplement, and they're making about $5 an hour more than they were. We've got workforce development doing all kinds of jobs fairs. We've got free CDL driver training for school bus drivers. We've got really aggressive work to hire folks, but we're putting the call out trying to get more bus drivers, and it's tough. And this change in the school start times, while I support the concept, I would have hoped that it would be postponed for a year so that we could try to deal with some of this labor shortage issue. It is going to go forward. The school board is moving forward, so where we're left is aggressively higher. And it's happening all over the country that there are routes not getting covered, and we are as frustrated by it as any family. It's unacceptable. There's work being done in the school system. I mean, I do have to give them credit for they got a consultant to help them reorganize their school transportation. The consultant said that the routes aren't planned right. They've made a change this year where people have to actually say that they want to use the bus so that they don't have buses that are half empty in neighborhoods where most of the kids aren't using them, and they know. Hopefully that will be positive. People won't get left behind in that system, and they're working it. But it's going to be a challenging start to the school year.
All right. Anyone else on education? Comment, question, anything?
In the state of Maryland, are they going to offer parents that choose to homeschool or put their kids in private school, or are they going to get a tax break?
There's no change in the state of Maryland on that. That there's no tax.
That COVID happened and that we had to have our kids homeschooled or chose to have our kids homeschooled because they couldn't go to school because of masks and this
Yeah, no, there.
So why can't the school board offer a suggestion to the parents that choose to homeschool or send their kids to private school? I pay taxes for my kids to go to public school. My kids never went to a public school one day in their life.
Yeah.
I never got a tax break. My kids went to a private school.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
I paid for books. I transferred my kids back and forth. I didn't get a tax break.
Right.
When is that ever going to happen? When's it going to come? Things
Right.
are getting tight. People are having problems.
Yeah.
Inflation is happening. Where's the tax break?
Ma'am, I'm going to need you to summarize your comment, please. Summarize. Your minute is, everyone had a minute to speak. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No, understood. The school system is paid through property taxes that people pay regardless of whether they have a kid in school, whether their kid goes to private school or public school, and I understand that it doesn't seem. Or don't have children, right? Yep.
Why not have the funding follow the kid?
Well, there's a movement to do that, and you can advocate for that at the state level. What?
Do you support that or not?
No, I support having the public school system paid for by the whole community, and the reason for that is that I mean, this is a hot political topic.
So if the funding followed my children, the community would still be paying, which is completely aligned with what you just said, which is the community pays. But if the funding follows the kid and you don't support that, why?
Because the institutions of the public schools, if they start losing enrollment, they lose funding, and then the other kids suffer as well. It's to make sure that there's a public school system. What?
Or they just have to compete like every other job. If you're better at what you do, you don't have to worry about this.
Well, you know, there is a movement afoot. There are people who want to do that, who want to make it a competitive environment for the schools. But I believe that we're having enough trouble trying to come up with the funding to be able and create more equity in our school system, so that the kids that are struggling have opportunity by the time they get through. So school's always been the great equalizer, creating opportunity for every kid in our public school system. That's what it's designed to do. And I think, so,
The opportunity is to go to a school that's open and functioning and safe, and bring the county's public funding with them.
Sir,
well, people have the opportunity to do that. They can send their kids to private schools, and I have no problem with that. It's just that the system is set up so that the whole community pays in their property taxes for a school system, because that way the community's future is ensured by having everybody be educated. And I think every business in this county, most businesses understand that, and most people move to an area where the school systems are good, and it's the system that the school system is that we're focused on as government. So,
is there any other question or comment on education? We've got room for a couple more before we move to the environment. All right, well then we're going to roll into our environmental section. Can I invite up Janet Holbrook to kick off the section, please?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Just a little personal history. I'm a 24-year resident next week of Harold Harbor. I have a son who went to South Shore and the old mill system, and just this June graduated from Salisbury. So I'm very proud of him, and I am a member of WISE, that is Women, Indivisible, Strong, and Effective. And we're kind of a local group, a lot in Severn Park, and we advocate at the local government level and at the state government level, and work for policies that promote the environment, promote health agendas, like things like allowing people to die with dignity would be an issue that we are active in. And I'm also a member of the General's Highway. Thank you. And my job is as a professor of epidemiology at Johns Hopkins. Oh, and I also write a column at the Capitol that I was invited to write by Rick Hutzel a while back, after I'd written several columns about Crownsville and the tennis center. And I'm pleased to be here tonight. And what I have learned over the years of living in Crownsville, what I didn't realize, that what I lucked into, what a wonderful, unique area it is. There's the fairgrounds, there's Corridor Park that I've spent many hours playing volleyball at. And there's a whole group of people that have made that possible. The fact that we're in this beautiful building. I know that there's many people that have worked for that and to keep and preserve the community. I think even I was talking to Senator Riley years back, when he still talking to me, and he told me that he was the one that had kind of put forward the General's Highway to be a historic highway that's 8 miles. And if that 2-lane road, maybe you curse it, but it's protected us. And as well, I was sitting next to one time a guy who was working for Glendenning when they were designing 97. And they purposely, I didn't know this, they purposely did globally to help keep this community green. So they showed foresight in protecting the green heart and the green nature of Anne Arundel County. And I think you're doing so with Crownsville. But it isn't always a good story. There's the Wawa across from the Royal Farm, or it was vice versa. There's probably going to be a Dunkin' Donuts, the 6th one within 5 miles. I'm sure we need it, but that's zoning, and that they own it. They're allowed to do those kind of things. And just briefly, in Harold Harbor, there's a last long ago story that ended when I moved there, where the community actually lost control of a gem of that Harold Harbor Club right down there on the bay. Many don't even know about it. But they lost it because people wanted to restrict access. They wanted to protect it and keep it. And I think as we sit here in this very valuable area that people have foresight and continue to have foresight to protect, that we have to remember sometimes we best protect things meetings by allowing it to be a public resource, to have everybody invested in it. And finally, I want to thank you so much for the Forest Conservation Act. I know it wasn't perfect. I know it was, a bargain, but you shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of good. And I would encourage you as you go forward, there were amendments we saw right away, at least 6 months, within 6 months, that there were problems on Bestgate Road with that you need to keep moving forward in legislation like that. So I would just like to hear more about how you're going to protect the environment. And a final thank you for including the natural resource inventory in the GDP planning to make people value before they destroy. Because now we know that trees are a lot more valuable. So we have to start treating them more valuably. So thank you for your attention, and thanks for asking me to make comments.
All right, thank you. So I think the question was, what am I going to do in addition to what we have done to protect the environment? And I love that question and I'll try not to talk too long about it. But we did pass this forest conservation bill that was, for a brief period, it was the strongest county in the state. Howard County then saw what we had done, and then they strengthened theirs, and then Frederick County got a little stronger than ours. But the original bill that we put forward had no grandfathering clause. What passed did, and so you've seen some forests come down for subdivisions that were already in the pipeline, so therefore they were grandfathered in, and they didn't have to comply with the old with the new forest conservation restrictions. They were under the old ones. But a lot of what we have done and will continue to do to protect the environment is really to enforce the laws that are on the books. That we have some pretty good environmental laws, and they're not perfect. In fact, our land use code is not perfect. I think we need to rewrite the whole thing and start over again, because sometimes you have regulation on top of regulation and it doesn't all work together. And the good people at Plan and Zoning have spent all their time trying to sift through it all, and it doesn't always make sense. But the one of the things that Plan and Zoning did was to create a thing called green notices, where our environmental policy director got together with all of our land use folks and said, look, we got to be clear to builders and developers about how the law is going to be interpreted. So one of the green notices said that there will be no modifications, which is a way to get around the code, where you say, okay, well, the code just doesn't really work, so we're going to let you do things a little bit differently. And not all modifications are bad, but the ones that had negative impacts on the environmental features, the wetlands and the steep slopes and the trees and some of that, there would be no modification unless there was some mitigation where you're offsetting it and making it overall better. So it's been tough on some developers to deal with that, but it's been an important tool to be able to protect a lot of space. I look at the environment more broadly than that as well. There's the erosion from the construction sites, and now we have, and there's the storm water that creates the erosion from the existing development and impervious surface that we have. So we created a stormwater strike team that actually goes out beyond just the site and looks at the streams that are being, where the runoff is gouging and gouging deeper and deeper and taking more and more sediment out into our creeks and our rivers. And that is really just getting started, and they're doing a better and a better job of doing that. We need better standards. We helped to get a state bill passed for stormwater standards, where it has to be designed not for the 1.5 inches or so, I think it was, of the old kind of rainfall we used to get, but the much higher rainfall levels that we're getting now, so that it evolves and becomes, protects erosion, prevents erosion better. But that's huge for our county because we have 530 miles of coast, as you all know, and we're trying to clean up the bay. And then, there are the bigger issues than that, even of finally getting to renewables. And we early on, we created a plan to move our whole county fleet to electric. And then just this last year, we did an executive order to get all county, to make sure that all of the power that we use in the county is renewable, either purchased renewable or created on site. So we've got landfills now that are getting solar put on them, and we're soon going to get to putting solar on buildings and making our buildings more efficient and showing it as an example to the communities that we can do that. And then, to take it even further, we've got these fantastic nonprofit organizations. We've got the Watershed Stewards Academy that we've done Replant Arundel with. I've got a really cool hat that you can get that is about that, planting a ton of trees. And people are really engaged in this county because they moved here because they love the environment and nature. And there's another aspect to all of that, which is improving the quality of our forests. And that's the invasive species that we have. And making sure that our good trees aren't coming down because they have ivy or whatever invasive it is. And we put money into our budget this year for the first time, $500,000 in rec and parks, to do a vegetative management plan for their land. But we want to take that out and help to build the army with the nonprofits, the Scenic Rivers Land Trust and others who are working on this. And I think that we can be a leader in the nation in Anne Arundel County on improving the quality, the management of our forests and our green space. Because then we have the biodiversity that makes the soil more absorbing and protects our bay. So we got a lot of work to do, and we're going to do it.
All right. So we'll now call some of you up for comments or questions on the environmental section. We have a handful of people pre-registered to speak on this. So first up is Stephen Ward. And as you come up, could I just to reiterate some of the rules, please speak from the mic if you're in the bottom. If you're on the top, we can make an exception there just because it's so far away. But raise your hand. Let me address you before you start speaking. And again, please keep your comment to a minute. There's a lot of people here, and we want to be able to get through as many folks as we can. So thank you for helping me out in that way. Mr. Ward.
Okay, well, thank you. I think you addressed early on, obviously I was here to talk about Downtown Creek and the effect that it had not only on the forest, but the watershed there. The estuary, I mean, if you walk down and you can see the bird life down there. It's also a major fish hatchery. I mean, we get fish in that part of the creek, new fish that wind up going out to the ocean. Good decision, and obviously the forest, you got to walk in the forest. You talked about the quality of the trees, great overgrowth trees in there, and I would recommend anybody gets a chance to walk in this forest to do that. So you've already taken care of the concern that I have in terms of not looking at that as a water access, looking for other places to do it. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I also want to say that it's a beautiful, protected forest, and one of the reasons it's protected is because there are volunteers who are out there. Where's the trails guy? Who's the trails main? Right, I forget your name. Steve, right, okay. This guy goes out there and he alone, unpaid, maintains the trail. So tree drops, somebody's got to open it back up again. And so while there's a section of it that's owned by the county now, and there's other sections that are owned by communities, and there's the state owned by DNR, it's important that county work with you all and not fix what's not broken, right? So there may be an opportunity there, and we'll engage with you all if there's an opportunity to do something, some parking somewhere. I know that there have been some concerns about people parking where they shouldn't be parking in front of people's houses. So we'll work with you on that. And Rec and Parks will work with you on the part that they own to try to help them maintain the trails. But so far, I think you guys are doing a great job with that. And I know there were a lot of motorbikes and things out there for a while that were creating erosion and doing a little tearing things up. And you've even managed to, with the help of the police department, chase some of those folks away. So you're doing a great job of maintaining that. And to me, when I see a community, any group of people that is so connected to their land that they're taking care of it, often investing their own money in protecting it, the government needs to support that. And so that's what we're going to do here.
Next up, Ms. Weller.
Thank you for holding these meetings. I agree with your words in Millersville Park. In February, you, at the Zoom meeting, you agreed to include local community in the development of the Viewers Park option, and that it would be a park even the closest neighbors would like. We were pleased that you slowed the process to complete the traffic and environmental studies to help with the design a more neighborhood-friendly park and avoid overdevelopment. In conversations you have with local leaders, myself, Don Muller, and Scott Blackover, we also said that you would consider a mix of uses for the Millersville Park that meets other priority needs in the LTPRP besides ball field, things that would not negatively impact the environment, traffic, noise, etc. That said, it still sounds like a collection of ball fields at the top of the priority. You said just now that it's in the LTPRP. Yet, when we spoke, you said that was a God and things could be changed. But yet again, it sounds more like, it's still going to be ball fields, you know. I'm not totally reassured. Can you speak to the fact that the LTPRP has other highly ranked needs besides ball fields that would be active recreation and serve more music, not just youth, but seniors? The seniors are the largest growing demographic in the county.
Debbie, I'm going to need you to summarize your...
I'm going to do it.
Okay.
How will local leaders be kept in the loop? We have been kept in the dark in the past. This is a new opportunity to make us your partners, not your adversaries. Also, when will we receive the timeline that was promised in February? And when will we receive the studies? They're all interrelated with us trying to work with you as partners, not adversaries.
So, the timeline on what? The study, the traffic study, or the?
At the February 10th community leaders Zoom meeting, with Jeff Clay and a number of other people in the town, we promised a timeline of how things would proceed from Millersville Park. We requested it. We had family things. When we were born in June, we asked for it. We were told that it was in draft and needs to be worked on, and we get it in several weeks. It's almost 6 months. How can you trust if you don't get a response? And also, who will be our point person at the county? How are we going to do this? We're being shut out again.
So I'll get back to you on the timeline. I don't have the timeline with me for that. The budget process is what you should be looking at, and if there's if they come up with a master plan, eventually they have to make a master plan. That's and that would get funded. So I think.
Will we be included in that?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
How? When? What is the timeline? How will we know?
Well,
Coming out.
we want to do the as I said, we want to do the traffic study and the environmental studies, and I think you all have made your voices heard to some degree. We can meet anytime you want to, talk more about ideas about what can be done there, but.
Sure, can I?
Yeah,
just,
sure.
Just say, so one thing, thanks for your comment. In that February 10th meeting, I was at that one as well. And the time that was promised assumed that there was going to be budget money in this fiscal year to move forward with construction. The big thing that came out of that meeting was you made the decision to not put any new funding for Millersville Park in this fiscal year 23 budget. So at that point, it kind of blew up the timeline that they had working on that we told you all were in draft. And so that's part of why that shifted a little bit. I don't view that as a promise not kept. I view that as y'all being heard and us saying, like, this needs to slow down. No new money is in that budget at all. I have seen it. We have asked for, okay, now that we know there's no new money in the budget this year, we're going to do the traffic study, we're going to do an aquifer study. We have been working with the department and saying, okay, what's a revised timeline? with the assumption, or not the assumption, but now the fact that there is no new money in that, we will get that to you. I've seen a draft of it, it is getting worked on, we will get that to you soon.
I think what you need is to communicate with us. You know that we're active and we're not going away.
Debbie, I need to move on to,
Not go by. You should be communicating with us. You should have a point person.
the,
We have no idea what's happening.
Well, you've got James, you've got the Rec and Parks people too, and I know there've been some issues there, but, I think I've met with you a number of times. I'm happy to meet again.
all right. Next up, we've got Stacy Henderson.
I'm Stacy Henderson, but I don't know that I really asked the question.
Okay. No, that's all right. I've got a check next to your name, so you wanted to make a comment or ask a question. No worries at all.
The teacher's calling on you, and you.
You were good. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to make a comment or ask a question on the environment? Yes, sir.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. My name is William West. I've been in this immediate vicinity since 1980. So I'm fairly familiar with it. I've been to several of these meetings, including down in Annapolis, over the Millersville Park situation. It happens to run right into my backyard. The other problem with it, it's interesting you want to put a ball field right on Route 97 entrance ramp. That should make things exciting. But much bigger problem. Now, this will be the fourth time I brought it up, and actually, you partially answered it this time. I'm really happy to see that. You're starting to talk about environmental surveys. The other thing you start to talk about is water. That's the one thing in this immediate area we do not have. There's wells going dry left and right around here. We're down to the third aquifer. That is the last one. Once that glass is empty, we are done. What Anne Arundel County needs to do is start going into this totally new concept of what they call in Baltimore City and Howard County is a reservoir. And they know how a place to put stormwater in a place where you get water for these huge communities you keep on improving, you keep on drilling wells into the aquifers. You're up against a real serious problem. Even if you can drill down, what cost when I moved into this area to drill a well was $8,000. Now it's $30,000. And you're about to run out of water, so you best get moving on this. Now, I've been talking about this for a year and a half. This is the first meeting where somebody actually said, oh, we're going to look for water. Well, I hope you really look at this. I believe in the old adage that seek and you shall find. And believe me, you won't have to look far. You can always contact me, and I'll give you some experts on the matter with the University of Maryland and a few other places that actually know the true story. Thank you.
You sound. My father used to talk about the same thing. He was a member of the Chesapeake Environment, CEPA, the Chesapeake Environmental Protection Association, and they've been real leaders on that issue in South County.
Well, the problem is we're just, and I'm sorry.
No, so there's other people with their hands up, and I really do, like, once you get your minute, like, I need us to move on so other people can ask their questions as well.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you, sir, I appreciate it. Yes, ma'am?
Me?
Yes.
Real fast, the property on Harold Harbor Road and River Road, that intersection, they were talking about building 25 homes there the last couple of years, and you're trying to keep it as conservation next to the sawmill there. Any idea what's going on there?
Is that the Gary Garman sawmill?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know Gary, and I know he wants to preserve land, and I know that they were talking to Scenic Rivers Land Trust, but I haven't heard anything about that lately. I certainly haven't heard about them doing any development either. Okay.
Then we got room for one more question or comment on the environment.
There's one on the
Yes,
left
ma'am.
in the back. Oh.
Yes, ma'am. We'll do two more. I called on you as well.
I can speak from here. I have a pretty loud voice. I'm concerned about the clear cutting we do in the state of Maryland for Anne and Lynn County for development. I would like to see clear cutting outlawed. I'd like to see selective farming trees for any type of developments. Since our tree canopy is down to, I believe, 39%, something like that now. And secondly, I would also
I don't know the answer on whether there's any legislation anywhere regulating when. Do you know?
Critical areas somewhat, outside of critical areas there is not.
In the critical area, there's they control when you can cut based on the season?
Somewhat.
Okay, so in critical areas, there's some legislation on that. Would be state legislation, but it's interesting. You should talk to your state legislators for sure about that, because they're. Now, the clear cutting in general is that's why we passed the forest conservation. We had lost so much forest in this county. We had literally things that were designated as greenways in our plans that were clear cut for subdivisions, and so we strengthened the forest conservation in a way that it made it so expensive to develop on that land. The developers tell me I put them out of business, and they're going to run me out of office because I put them out of business. And those would be people who were speculators who bought forested land on the assumption that they could put a subdivision there, and now it's just too expensive. So there have been some applications that have been rejected, and there have been a number that haven't gone in as a result of that. Now, the grandfathering clause that allowed anything that was already in the pipeline to not be under the new forest conservation, we knew there were going to be a lot of Lisa Rodvian here was one of the few who voted against giving them a grandfathering clause. We were opposed to the grandfathering clause, but I think the video that you saw from Growth Action Network was an example of something being clear-cut for a development because of the grandfathering clause that the county council put into our bill.
Even during that time, even though it was migratory bird season?
Now, there's no, I mean, so they don't regulate when you can do the cutting, unless, as I guess there's some restrictions in the critical area. So that's not part of the code. Yeah.
And then the last question was over here.
Yeah, I'm Linda Orr. I just want to follow up on the tree conservation business. Your second statement here about modifications, and that you were really doing well on modifications, but I find that there were, in the past 3.5 years, there have been 878 approved modifications. 417 of those were modifications concerning the environment, steep slopes, specimen trees, streams, and their buffers, wetlands, and their buffers. And I'm wondering what kind of mitigation did those developers do for those modifications that they received?
So the answer would be different for each one because they were case by case. We had a meeting about this very topic where the man in the room who knows the answers is Steve Ziegler from Plan and Zoning, and compared before we came in with our new way of looking at modifications and at the applications in general. The number of modifications approved, they were virtually all approved, and there was a much higher number. A lot of the modifications that were being requested before are not being requested because the developers don't want to, I mean, they know how it's being interpreted, so they don't ask for things that, like they used to always ask for the community meeting to be waived, and they would waive the community meeting. They don't bother asking for that now. I don't think they're asking for that, but and a lot of the environmental modifications that they were asking for, then they're not asking for because they know the answer is no. And so for every time that there's been a modification on the environment, they've had to comply with the green notice. That means that there's been some way to offset that, but it would be different in every case.
But 417 in the last 3.5 years on the environment?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know the exact number, but if that's what you've got, I'm not questioning it. But there are a lot of applications that come in. Most of them are for that could be for a single home or, I guess the numbers add up, but I don't know the numbers. Yeah.
All right. We are going to move on to the public safety segment to make sure we cover that as well.
Maybe you can put your question into that bucket. Or you can do it at the end when it's wide open, right?
We can do it like that as well. So I apologize, but I'm going to try to move us forward. I'd like to invite up Steve Andraka to introduce the public safety section.
Hello, my name is Steve Andraka. I've been a resident of Crownsville, Harbor area for 35 years now. I'm a local civil engineer. I've enjoyed living in Harold Harbor, the Crownsville area. When my wife and I talk about it, there's nothing that makes us want to leave. We've raised 2 kids through the public school system. They're both engineers doing well. We've got great amenities in the community, the bike trails. Bacon Ridge has been an excellent project that you poured us through. You saved us Valentine Creek trails. There's nothing, it's the best place. And,
For all. It's right there.
But all the amenities, even the newly paved Old Harold Harbor Road up to Sunrise Beach Road. Thank you, Chris. You know, all those kind of things that make this a great place. But one thing that we all take for granted is public safety. You don't think about that because we enjoy it. It's there. People in Baltimore don't get to enjoy the public safety we do. You've done an excellent job, but my understanding is that in 2021, you brought the violent crime rate in Anne Arundel County down 11% compared to 2020. Excellent. Making it
I don't know that I brought it down, but it came down, yeah.
And part of public safety is just the feeling that you're safe. I mean, in my community alone, I know at least 3 police officers that live there. And that's possible because they've gotten a wage increase to make them competitive with other jurisdictions, so they stay here. They can afford to live in the communities that we enjoy ourselves. There's a police cruiser that goes through the community, running to a crime scene, but cruising around, making sure things are okay, meeting the public. So if there is a crisis, they're familiar with the area. And that's been made possible by having enough resources, enough police officers. I understand that we've increased the police staff by from under 700 to 800 over the past couple of years.
You're stealing all my talking points, you know. But that's okay.
Well, the one thing that with the police, with the feeling of safety, you know, you go up in the city and you see boarded up commercial centers and whatnot. And so it's been a blight having a Wawa boarded up and with a chain link fence around the place. And you know, I have friends come visit me and they say, "What, your neighborhood going downhill?" And so kudos to you for killing 2 birds with 1 stone, acquiring the property for the firehouse, getting rid of the blight there, and providing us a state-of-the-art firehouse in the area. I'm looking forward to that because I know that's going to help the community even with their insurance rates and for easy response. I believe you've also increased our fire staff. And also, what's interesting is cross-training that's been taking place. I understand they've increased by 50% the number of firemen that are trained as paramedics now. And you see a fire truck going down the road and you think, oh, there's a firefighter going. They're paramedics too. They're providing the safety net that we've come to expect and take for granted. Really appreciate having that kind of, that's what keeps us here, you might say. Now, you know, things like the crisis intervention team for mental health situations, where they team with the police and come into play. So there's been a lot of things that have taken place, and I really like to acknowledge the key investments that you've made in our public safety. But myself and other neighbors, what else is there? What's the next steps? What's your vision for continuing public safety for not just our community, but for the county as a whole? So every part of the county can enjoy the safety that we enjoy here. Being able to park at Bacon Ridge and not worrying about your car getting broken into, or not worrying about violent attacks or anything like that.
Wow, you did cover a lot of my talking points. Thank you. But no, I like the question too, because the way you put it is we have a great quality of life, and it can all change real quick with one incident. And I actually have always My dad worked for the Defense Department, and he did civil defense, and he used to say that government was created back in the day, I guess, for public safety, to protect people from threats. So it is the fundamental obligation of government, I think. We're lucky that we got a really good police department. We got a really good fire department. We've got a really good Office of Emergency Management, which is actually something that we've put a lot of changes and investment into, professionalizing it. It used to be all people that were hired and they worked for a couple of years and they worked on contracts because they were under a grant. We decided we needed to modernize our Office of Emergency Management and have permanent people who could do the emergency planning that we need, and they cover a lot more than they used to. The police officers will tell you that they appreciate the raises that they got and the increase in the number of sworn officers and the technology. They actually love those body-worn cameras because they can look at the video of every interaction that they have and learn from it and see whether they did a good job or whether they should have changed. They actually coach each other watching these videos, and we've managed to get enough cars so that every officer has a squad car when they get a badge. And we got a great police chief and a great command staff and great officers. But we do have to support it. Same with the fire department, and we've helped there. They've got some facility issues in both. In our capital budget, we're investing a lot. But one thing that we don't have that most counties in Maryland have is a joint 911 call center, so that all the calls come into one place, and modernize it and make sure that they're the first responders. And you've probably heard about some of the things where something fell through the cracks, and it can be a life or death issue when that happens. And those folks aren't paid as well as the ones that are out on the street, but their work is just as important. So we have reclassified their positions so that they can make a career out of it. But we're also, we just put into our capital budget a joint 911 call center that will also be our emergency operations center, and it will be managed by our Office of Emergency Management. And we think that's going to really take us into the next, decade. Got to use the technology. Everybody's got a cell phone, and why shouldn't they be able to, send a photograph in to the 911 call center and use that and all the digital tools that exist to have faster response times. But we have to keep up with the growth of the county, and that was the big complaint, that we didn't grow our police department while our population was growing. You talk about the paramedics. Most of the calls are not fire calls. They're calls to take somebody to an emergency room, and then they wait at the emergency room for hours. That's a whole nother story. But the whole system has to work together. All the public safety agencies, our hospital, our health department even, to be able to improve public health. And then there's opioids and some of the struggles and challenges that cause crime. When we say we had an 11% drop in serious crime, it's not just because the police department was catching people for doing stuff. It was because people didn't do the stuff because either they had a good job and they didn't need to, they had a better education, they got off drugs, they had a mental health issue that improved. And so one of the things I'm most proud of is that while we were doing all the COVID mitigation, all the work in the health department, vaccinating and all of that, the health department was also never slowed down on the opioid intervention team. And actually, we had about a 20% drop last year, 20 to 21, but 21 to 22 so far, we've actually had a 40% decline in overdose. And I have to credit that to the work that the health department and all of our health and human service agencies have done. So that improves public safety as well when people aren't using and addicted. And then gun violence, of course, I know, yeah. Gun violence, of course, is huge, and we have created this thing modeled after the opioid intervention team called the gun violence intervention team, and it's an interagency thing led through the health department, and it's using science, looking at it as a public health issue, like everything else what people die from, and they die from gun violence, so that work is ongoing. They're working with the police department, the mental health agencies, and And I think we're going to be seeing some progress from that and working in communities where there's high rates of gun violence. So lots more to do, but that's all on the agenda.
All right, thank you, sir. We would like to invite Neil Lazat. And said you had a question on public safety.
Hello, my name's Neil Litzau. I live on Crownsville Road. Crownsville Road's always been a racetrack since I was in high school. I moved to Crownsville Road in 1986. Since then, I've had 13 cars in my yard. In the last month, we've had 3 cars leave the road and go into my neighbor's yard. And it's really getting out of hand as far as the amount of cars using Crownsville Road as a racetrack and a high-speed place to practice. Weekends are lovely because we get groups of motorcyclists and other groups coming down Crownsville Road. I don't know that the gentleman here that can fix or help fix the problem is here, but I'd like to see, I've noticed in several parts of the county that you have a mobile ticket writer that is parked on the street and left there for quite some time. I'm hoping you can make it permanent on Crownsville Road because it's really, it's getting quite out of hand.
You mean
I'd like to make sure there's immunity granted to my neighbor's zone.
Wow, we should have somebody follow up with you and find out where your address, where those 13 cars are ending up in your yard. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done for that.
That's since '86. I've only had 2 recently.
Okay. Only 2, yeah.
So make sure you get my business card before you leave. We'll follow up on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking recently about speed cameras, and the state law says you can only put them around schools, certain places, but some counties have gotten authority to do them everywhere. And I know they're somewhat controversial, but I feel like we're to the point where we need to get that authority from the state so that then we can put speed cameras where we think speed cameras should be, whether it's temporary or permanent, wherever it is, because there are places where I know we have a Vision Zero plan to try to get to 0 traffic deaths and injuries. Not likely to get there, but that's the goal.
How about speed bumps?
What?
How about speed bumps?
Well, we have, yeah, I mean, speed bumps, there's a system for that with Public Works, and they're really good at that. They do an assessment, and under certain conditions, they'll do them. They'll either recommend them or not recommend them. Sometimes that gets overridden, and they do them anyway, but speed bumps do go up, and we have a speed bump program. But we're not going to put a speed bump on a 40-mile, 50-mile-an-hour road because it'd be dangerous, or on a highway. But speed cameras, we know, save lives. They do reduce accidents. So we may be heading in that direction. Let us know if you think it's a terrible idea.
All right. So we are running out of time. I'm sure I will follow up with you, but I do want to see if anyone else has questions on public safety. Sorry that we haven't heard from you. If there's time, we will. Sir?
Yes, my name is Brian Aker, and the only problem that we've had in our neighborhood came from the Crownsville location, from some of the nonprofits that were there. Now, I really support their mission and what they're trying to do, but are there going to be ways that you try to make sure that if you have any nonprofits in the Crownsville area, that they do maintain control over the people that they have there, that they're trying to service, so that we don't have any crime in the neighborhood?
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we have to be very careful about. There are 4 organizations that are operating now that are crisis response or addiction treatment facilities, and then of course there's the food bank that's there, and there's some smaller nonprofits as well, and it can't be a place, we have to have those services in communities. So it's not all going to come to Crownsville because they have to be community based. And communities don't want it in their neighborhoods. Actually, this community has been more receptive to that work than any other in the county. And I think maybe it's because of the history of the Crownsville Hospital Center. I hope there have not been a lot of incidents, but we will have to monitor them. People will, every organization is going to have to be responsible for their people, and I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah.
Another question on public safety? Yes, ma'am, at the top.
How are you? Look forward to working with you on Millersville Park again. I live on Cecil Avenue, north of Millersville Road, and there are two issues concerning public safety. The old Knollwood facility has been vacated for 9 years, boarded up, drug deals, and lease all the time. The property owners now have permits in to make it into an eating disorder facility. That's been going on for 4 years. And they say they're not getting their permits to start the inside. So I don't want to point blame, but if planning and zoning can please find out what's going on, because we already have 4 police reports. Every day there are cars in the back parking lot doing drug deals. And this is a cul-de-sac small community. Number 2,
What's the facility called again? The what facility?
the old Knollwood nursing home, which Genesis abandoned 9 years ago.
Okay. You get that? Yeah. Okay.
Second issue, DPW sent us a little form. We had requested in 2018 to come look at the road because it was caving in from rainwater runoff from Royal Farm to Wawa issue, which we were told by DNR was not runoff, it was our water table. We got a flyer in the mail 3 weeks ago that they're going to slurry the road. We have called, we have 3 tickets in. We want the engineer to come out and address the caving in road. The school buses currently drive to the other lane to get away from the 8-inch drop on my house. I don't want a school bus in my front yard next year, or a snowplow, or a trash truck. And, you know, we are a very active community, and if those trucks show up, it's not gonna be weird. Don't come slurry the road, come talk to us. When they came to do the tar project office in Amherst County, I got him out of his car, put his foot under the road in front of my house. There's some issues, and that is public safety.
You bet. Okay. So you got those. So these are the kinds of things that I have to put in a plug for our CECS team, Community Engagement and Constituent Services. What they do is you can contact them directly. They take some cases that there are lots of ways to report things. There's the 311 system, the see-click fix. You can take a picture of something, send it in, and it does get monitored and followed up on. The difficult ones, we have a meeting every week. We sit down and they raise issues that came up in a community. Some of them are policy issues countywide, and that's the only way to fix them. It's in the law. They deal with this stuff constantly. They have maybe a hard job. Thank you for your service. Yeah. So they will work with the agency that and figure out who it is that is responsible and make sure it gets followed up on. That's what they're there for. So. And you've got the agency already here taking notes. So we've had situations where a text message went from the meeting to Public Works, and they're like fixing it by the time you get home. They really do try, our public servants.
All right. Well, I think we got room for like one more on public safety, and then we'll keep the agenda moving. Sharon.
Thanks. It reminded me when you brought up gun safety that I wanted just informational status that there were 2 laws passed about gun safety by the county council. One to distribute information with every purchase, suicide prevention, violence prevention, and the other one was Smash and Grab, sponsored by Andrew Kirksey. And they're both subject to lawsuits against the county by Shell Pass and a couple of gun stores. And so I want to know what's happening with that, and also what's your vision to make us safe and respect people's rights, but I want my right to walk around and not be afraid of something to shoot.
Yeah. Well, my philosophy about it is that we can't let a national debate about what the writers of the Second Amendment meant when they wrote it get in the way of us doing common sense things to separate people who clearly everybody agrees shouldn't have a gun or shouldn't have it in a certain place from having it. So Anne Arundel County has done more of the extreme risk protective orders, our police department, than any other county in Maryland. And I believe that they've saved lives. That a family member knows that, so-and-so is not in a condition to have a gun, and he's been carrying it around and whatever, and they have to come and take it away, and it's difficult. It goes through the court system, or it goes through a board that has to approve it. But continuing to use those, I'm a little nervous about, or more than a little nervous about, the Supreme Court decision that basically says that Maryland's gun laws are no longer constitutional. So there's a concern. There's already been, I read, a huge increase in the number of applications for concealed carry, and they can't say no anymore. So the concern, of course, is that when you go into a public place, that everybody's carrying a gun. And I know that people in our police department are concerned about that. That if everybody's got a gun, then it's a much more dangerous job to be a police officer. So I think we have to be creative about using any legislation that we can that passes constitutional muster the way it is now, to ban guns from being carried in certain places. I don't want to go to church and know that everybody's got a gun in there. So, but at the same time, there are there's mental health work to be done, and there's educational work to be done. There's gun safety training to be done. I'm part of a national coalition that is actually working with manufacturers of guns to do testing for them on safety mechanisms on guns. They're biometric devices, and you can't pick up my cell phone and make a call because it recognizes me. Maybe if I had a gun, you shouldn't be able to use it either. So there's a lot of work to be done on that.
We're going to move into the segment where you don't have a ton of time left here, but ask questions on anything that were not in those three topic areas. Before we do that, I want to invite Gail Campbell from Baldwin Hall onto the microphone to give a brief statement from the people who take care of Baldwin Hall, where we are right now.
Yeah.
I am one of the trustees here at Baldwin Hall, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight. And because you are here, it shows that you care deeply about our community. And we are glad that you chose our historic building for your meeting tonight. We offer our building free of charge to community organizations, and we are happy to do so. We depend almost entirely on volunteers to maintain the building. Many people believe that this building is associated with Baldwin Church across the road. It is not. This building was built in 1861 and formerly sat where the stone church is across the street. And at that time, it did belong to the church. In 1896, when the stone church was built, the building you were sitting in was moved across Indian Landing Road. And it sat there until the 1980s. And it was moved again at that time to this present location because the church no longer could afford to keep the building up. And unfortunately, it was slated to be demolished. A group of people moved in to try and save the building, and we are known as Severn Crossroads Foundation. And it serves as a community center now. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization recognized by Maryland Historical Trust. Because of the pandemic, we have been unable to raise funds to keep our building going, and we have used most of our reserve funds to keep things afloat. We just replaced 2 of our HVAC systems at a cost of $18,000. We have applied for numerous grants, some of which we received, but most of which we do not. And we're asking
we've got time for a couple more questions. Is there anyone that has a question on a topic not in one of those buckets? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
My name is Caitlin Bell. I was born and raised in Crownsville. And I just wanted to reiterate what the brief comments and the gentleman here had mentioned. My family lives on Crownsville Road. I grew up on Crownsville Road, and people fly down the road. There are many instances where people can't even stay out of my parents' yard because they're coming around so fast. The gentleman here who spoke about, yes, public programs are beneficial to the community. However, safety is very much important as well. There have been more than a handful of instances in my lifetime where persons are discharged from these programs and have walked their backyards with their infants. They have picked up Ubers from people's front yards. So there seems to be a lack of coordination on being discharged, but they are major concerns for safety. So yes, restore Crownsville. I have family members that work there, but safety should be a very concern for that. Because again, it's very dark around Crownsville. There are streetlights, but not very many. So other than personal security and so forth, those programs should just consider how they handle their patients or persons using those services so that everyone in the community feels safe. People walk the road, but again, we want to make sure that those people walking across the road, everyone wants to trust who they see on the road.
Thank you. I'll just note that, well, thanks in part to many of the community organizations here who wrote letters in support of the county acquiring Crownsville. That was very helpful. We had about 40 community organizations supporting it. But that we in Arundel County will be the landlord for those organizations now, and rather than the state being the landlord for those organizations. And so we will continue to remind them that when people leave, it's their responsibility to make sure that they have somewhere to go and they can't just open the door and turn people loose. And I don't think most of them do that. I think it's hopefully just an occasional situation, but.
I'm in my 30s, and there have been more than I can count on my two hands of incidents of various, even we've gotten the calls from the county that tell us, they're looking for somebody, so close your doors, be on the lookout. I'm old enough to remember those calls, so.
Yeah.
They've been happening for a while.
Okay.
Yes, sir, in the back. Yes, sir.
The corner down here, Sunrise Beach and General Highway with Wawa, it's rather busy, and I just wanted to know if there's a timeline with school starting, the construction of the firehouse. That will probably disrupt traffic a bit.
I heard
I
spring.
believe I think it's being contracted now. February and March for breaking ground is around that area. So it's not going to start right at the start of school. So, and we'll definitely keep you informed as that gets closer. But my understanding is they're bidding out the contract right now to get it built, and they won't break ground until February or March.
Okay.
Is that right, Chris?
It's being bid in October, and we would expect breaking ground in February and March.
Okay, will there be signs put up for like detours or?
To the extent that they're required, yes.
Okay.
Detour signs. But, with every construction job, we have to have a safe zone, so it could be speed limits are reduced to that order.
Correct. Very good. Thank you.
Isn't it satisfying to have a fire station replace a Wawa? I mean, we all love Wawa, but we seem like we have enough of them. But yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
When will our regional area council commission be implemented so the citizens can be members of it and participate? One of the particularly concerning issues that happened recently was when the council approved the clearing of land all the way down to Tucson Refuge for another development
Yeah, that was the one. And the council doesn't actually approve project by project, but it is the council that approved the grandfathering clause that allowed that one to be clear cut. But the region plans for this region's begins, it's in the third round, so that there are 9 regions. They go 3, 3, and 3, because there's no way to do them all at once and have enough staff to do that. Spring of 24, is that right?
It's either 24 or 25.
Okay, so 24, 20, so you're which is, it's good if you don't want rezoning, you don't want change. It's bad if you want to change a lot of stuff soon. I think the developers that want to change stuff are kind of in a hurry to get these done, but you're in the third round, so there's some time before that, which doesn't mean you can't engage and, have your voice heard.
All right. Yeah, so we're 15 minutes over where I wanted to be. I know there's still people that have questions, but we're going to move into closing statements, so there's time for people to mingle, and you can come up and talk with the county executive at the end, and we'll do some of that. So do you have any closing statements for us, sir?
Do I have a closing statement? Oh, okay. Me? I think I've said enough. But mostly just thank you for coming out, and thank you for caring about your community, and stay in touch with our team, and let us know what we can do for you.
Thank you all for being here.